So this is the brand new Garmin Varia Vue front headlight and a safety camera. So it automatically will go ahead and record everything goes on in front of your bike in the same way that Garmin's rear camera taillight radar combo dish does for the back of your bike. It's something that people have been assuming Garmin would make now for about a decade since Cyclica launched their Fly 12 front series camera, and now we finally have it. Now in this video I'm going to dive through all the details on this after using it here for a couple weeks across all sorts of different riding conditions, both daylight as well as nighttime. So the very first thing to know about this device is probably the price. It is $549 US. Like I said, it's not cheap, and it got more expensive over the last couple days. You can thank Trade Terraforce for that. In any case, as for the weight, it is 199 grams. That is basically about 50 grams more than a GoPro Hero 13 Black, so it's a little bit more weighty, but of course the GoPro doesn't have the front light on it and the bigger battery to accommodate not only that light, but also the longer recording times. We'll get into the battery recording times, both the claimed as well as the actual, in my testing a little bit later on in the video. From a design standpoint, it does actually have a GoPro style mount up there. It is replaceable in case you were to somehow break it. And then on the back here, it's got USB-C charging as well as a micro SD card port right there that you can put a micro SD card in to record that footage. Now when it comes to mounting, it comes with an out front mount. That mount will also hold your Garmin, so your Garmin Edge series device, and then this simply locks into it with this little like locking mechanism adapter to it. Now in my case, none of my current bikes except my mountain bike have true round style handlebars, so I just use the underside GoPro mount on those particular out front mounts to connect to the GoPro mount on the Varia Vue. No problems there at all with that, and it works just fine. So with the Varia Vue mounted up, we'll get into some of the different software features. Roughly speaking, that divides into the light side of things, and then the video recording side of things, and then the app side of things. And each one of those has different categories, and of course we will definitely talk about footage quality as well. So let's start with the easiest bit, which is actually the light side of stuff. So the cool part here is that this uses the AMP Plus lighting standard. That means it's going to work with any bike computer out there that supports the AMP Plus lighting standard, which is all of the major ones, whether it's Garmin or Wahoo or Hammerhead or Coros, or I think even Sigma does it, and plenty of other companies as well. There are 5 different light settings on the Varia Vue. There is high at 550 lumens, there is medium at 300 lumens, there is low at 140 lumens, and all of those first 3 are just always on modes. And then there's both daylight flash and a night flash. In the case of the night flash, it's at 400 lumens, and the day flash is at 600 lumens. From a low always on standpoint, I could see that really darn far away in daylight, astoundingly far away. In fact, even at nighttime, it was super bright.
Watch my review too.
Don't watch this review. Now speaking of does fit right there, we've actually been trying to go through all the different light combination settings to figure out the battery life, which I'll get to in just a sec. So with the light bits all covered, we're starting to kind of venture into some of the camera bits with some of the different settings there in battery. So let's just dive straight into the camera control portions. Now, this camera by default is always running. So when you turn this thing on, it's going to start recording automatically, at least if you have it in the continuous option. There are 3 core options by default when you turn it on: continuous, radar contacts, and then off when you're just going to manually trigger it whenever you want. Because there is no standard for the camera control on AMP Plus, at least in terms of other companies adopting that, you're going to have to use a Garmin Edge device if you want to control the camera. But in a default scenario, like if I use this with a Wahoo device and I just have it default set in continuous mode, it'll automatically turn on and start recording, and you don't need those camera controls. And in many ways, as you'll see, the camera controls are kind of a bit overkill. So the very first thing you see on the screen there is we need to get this thing paired up as part of a light network. So if you had, for example, a Varia radar in the back, that's part of that light network. So using the Garmin Edge right here, if I just tap on that main screen, you see a couple of options along the top there. There's a camera icon that's going to simply take a picture. Then there's the next icon there, which will take a saved clip, a small short snippet of the video that just happened. And then the icon next to that will film your entire ride. Now, if you click on that little arrow to the right there, that basically shows you that same thing again. You've got take photo, save clip, and film ride. Now, save is an interesting term in Garmin lingo. For me and you, we would assume save means just recording the file to the device, and that is true, that's what it's doing. But saved has a special connotation in Garmin land, which means it's going to lock that file so it cannot get overwritten. But otherwise, everything's always saving all the time. However, if you want to film the entire ride, you tap that next button there, which will film the whole ride. And I did that by default for virtually all of my rides, because again, it's still recording no matter what, except this just marks this to upload it to the Garmin Varia Vault, which we'll dive into a little bit later on. And you can see it's always recording because at the very top it says REC. recording there. Versus if I were to hit the film ride button, it will now show at the top a tiny little counter indicating that it is counting for that particular filmed ride and putting it in the appropriate folders. Meanwhile, if I tap on the headlight camera at the top there, you can see the settings that are set. So video recording is continuous as opposed to on alert, the resolution 4K 30, audio recording on, and image stabilization on. Now at this juncture, if this seems a little bit complicated, two things to note. Number one is definitely go ahead and watch this video all the way to the end, mostly because that's just what the YouTube gods want and it helps keep everyone happy. It really does help out this channel. But number two is the fact that you don't need to have a bike computer or a phone or anything like that to control this. You can literally just turn this thing on, start riding, and it'll record everything automatically and the light will turn automatically. It's really that simple. But because we want to get things more complex, we're going to go ahead and open up the app to show you that side of things instead. So on the Varia app, there's basically two sides to this. One, there's a side for the front half of your bike, and then two, there's a side for the back half of your bike. So you can see in the upper portion there, it's connected to the front half of my bike. And if I were to turn this on here, it'll now show the lower portion as the rear side of the bike. There we go. Now we can see the back portion shown down below and the radar stripes that would be there from the radar on this particular camera. So this is about the Varia Vue. So we're going to go ahead and tap that top icon there. And you see the three options, just like we saw out in the bike, to record things, take a photo, and settings. Within this, I can go into the gallery. I can change the camera configuration. I can do software updates. If I go to camera configuration, you'll see the recording mode. Here's the same modes I mentioned earlier on about continuous, on radar activity, or off. Under video quality, I can set the quality there. I can stabilize the video on. Again, we definitely want that on, and turn on the microphone. We'll get into the footage and the microphone bits in just a second. You go into incident recording here, and this will automatically save a clip in case there's an incident. So it'll basically ensure that clip is not overwritten. And then down at the bottom here, data overlays. And there's three core overlays. Number one is GPS coordinate overlays, like you see right now on the screen at the bottom there, showing your current GPS coordinates. Number two being a date and time overlay, either 12 or 24 hours. And then number three being the cyclist overlay, showing the speed of the cyclist right there. After that, you've got the gallery. Once I've joined the Wi-Fi network, you can now see all of that footage right there unlocked. Now this is locked footage because I selected the film ride, the entire ride option. If I hadn't selected that option, then I would find all of that same footage in the unlocked option right there instead, because that means it's allowed to be overwritten. To once again reiterate, everything is always recorded. It's whether or not it's considered locked or saved in Garmin lingo that matters here. And then finally, there's the download option on the upper right hand side there to choose which footage you want to download to the app itself. And that can be downloaded directly from the camera via Wi-Fi, or the last option being downloaded from Garmin Vault. So let's talk about Garmin Vault. Garmin Vault is Garmin's cloud platform where it uploads footage from not just the Varia Vue camera, but also Garmin's dash cams. In fact, it's been around for the dash cam side for a number of years. The cycling side here introduced today is, of course, the new bit. Unfortunately, Garmin doesn't really separate out that too much. Not by too much, I mean at all, really, in the sense that they're still charging you the same rate. So it is $99 a year for you to upload your footage to Garmin Vault. And the way this works is that once you take a USB cable, you simply plug it into the camera, it'll start uploading the footage to the Garmin Vault. In the same way that a GoPro does that, except that's actually not how it works. It only uploads the footage to the Garmin Vault if it's considered saved or locked footage. So all the rest of your footage doesn't get uploaded at all, which means that if you just went out for a ride and didn't press any buttons, none of that actually goes to the Garmin Vault. You're paying that $99 a year for nothing at all. For context, the GoPro action cameras, it's $49 a year for unlimited footage, and all your footage, no matter what you shoot in full resolution, 5.3K, 10-bit, whatever it is, goes up into the GoPro cloud automatic. So we're talking a pretty vast difference in the amount of footage you'd be putting into those respective cloud platforms. In a default configuration, you might never ever actually put any footage into the Garmin Vault despite paying for it. Now, am I going to use any of that footage up in the cloud? No, probably not. But I'm going to get my money's worth out of that $99. Now, obviously, I would propose to Garmin to have a much better system here, one that makes just a lot more sense for cyclists. I would say that when I plug this camera at the end of the day, it should automatically upload all of my footage, and then after, say, 60 or 90 days, something like that, it can purge off the footage unless I've marked that footage as an incident to be saved or archived or whatever the case may be. That would make way more sense. Now, not $99 cents. I think $49 would be much more reasonable, because at this moment, that's just crazy pants for something I might only put like 2 minutes of footage into for the entire year. So now let's go back to the battery side of things here. Here is the Garmin chart, the official chart of all the different settings there. In a nutshell, the biggest factor here is which light mode that you're on. Obviously, there's an impact between 4K and 1080p, but if the light's on, the light's going to be the biggest draw there. From there, we went and kind of iterated through some of these different settings here. Here's the results at the bottom there, but I want to focus on the one that was probably most applicable to me, which was the 4K with the electronic stabilization enabled and the low light mode. In that case, I went out for a 3-hour and 15-minute ride, and at the end of that, I had 3 out of 5 battery blocks remaining. It doesn't show you the exact battery percentage, it just shows you 5 blocks. That meant I had at least 60% battery remaining, but it could have been up to 79% for all I know. Okay, so let's get into the last section, which is the footage and readability. Now, when it comes to a footage standpoint, as we obviously have established, this thing records 4K, except it doesn't actually do that either, depending on which settings you have. Here is the chart from the manual showing the different resolutions. And you'll know one particular item there is 4K with EIS off versus on. And when you have electronic image stabilization, that will stabilize the image. It's the exact same thing that every single action camera on the market uses, but typically speaking, action cameras will have a much bigger sensor size. They will take a 5K or a 6K sensor size and then electronically stabilize within that. So basically you take this and you kind of shrink it down to here, and this part in the middle there is all nice and stable. In Garmin's case, they just took their 4K sensor that's up, I assume, probably from their vehicle dash cams, that same crappy sensor, and then stabilize within the 4K, so you actually end up with a less than 4K output at the end of the day. So that part isn't super great. And unfortunately, because this sensor is almost guaranteed to be from their dash cam side of things, the stabilization isn't awesome either, because it's stabilizing for cars as opposed to for bicycles. So here is some footage side by side between the GoPro on smooth roads. And on smooth roads, at a high level, things aren't horrific. They're not super smooth, but they're not horrific. However, most importantly here is that license plates and daytime footage is 100% readable in every scenario. I went through license plate after license plate after license plate from hours of footage, and every single time in daylight footage, it is 100% readable. Now, what about dirt road scenarios? Certainly dirt roads are getting more and more common, and you could encounter cars out there. In my case, we didn't find a single car on any of our dirt roads, but you can at least see what the stability is like of this. And again, it's not good at all. So let's talk about how easy it was to see with those lights on, primarily in darker conditions. Starting off with the high setting right here in the city right at sunset. So not like dark yet, and in the city with a bit more light. Again, it was totally fine to see everything on the road in front of you. However, one of the things we quickly realized is that super high brightness combined with the relatively crappy sensor of the Varia Vue that I'll talk about as well in a minute, meant that it actually blew out the license plate directly in front of us. If you look off the side right now in this footage, those parked cars, we could easily see those license plates, but every car directly in front of us couldn't see at all, at least on this camera. Now, once we got a little bit later on, it was a bit darker out, the same thing persisted as well. While the light from this was perfectly fine for my eyes to see everything around me, on the high setting, it made it virtually impossible to see any license plate, no matter how slow those cars were going. Though you could at least understand what was going on in a scene. So if a car did cut in front of you and you did at least know its license plate, that wouldn't be a problem. You'd be able to see what happened in that scene. Then we went off-road because, I don't know, we wanted to gather some footage that looked like it was from a horror film. When we went off-road there, you can see just fine around you, but obviously the camera starts to struggle. And then when I went into the trees, thinking this trail was a little bit wider than it actually was, that's when things got pretty horrific looking. But let's be honest, you're not buying this as a nighttime action camera, and even the GoPro struggles at night. Instead, you're going to need the Insta360 Ace Pro 2 or the DJI Action 5 if you want to be actually shooting nighttime footage. That's just a simple reality there. Ultimately, though, when you go back to the core scenario of daytime footage and picking up license plates of vehicles going past, I had no problems with any of that. Oh, one last thing we got to talk about, which is the audio. Okay, here's a bit of an audio test. Going through 20 kilometers an hour right now. Going up into 30 kilometers an hour, 35 kilometers an hour, 40 kilometers an hour, 45 kilometers an hour, and now coming up on 50 kilometers an hour. There we go. I'm just talking pretty normally, not shouting or anything like that. Now, before we wrap things up, I will mention there is one other competitor in this particular ballgame. That is the Cyclic Fly 12. They've been around for about a decade now, and they're on the third different version, I believe it is, of the Fly 12. I've just ordered the new Fly 12 a couple days ago. It shipped out today. Looks like it's on its way already to get stuck in customs for the next few days, so I'll untangle that and then eventually do a bit of a comparison between the two of them. In the case of the Fly 12 Sport, it is $319, but there are some pretty big differences there I'll go into in a future video. Probably the single biggest difference, aside from battery life and brightness and all those sort of things, is the fact that there is no Wi-Fi on that device. So if you want to download footage off that device, you're going to have to plug it in old school style. So just keep that in mind, but you're also saving $230, so you know, to each their own. Okay, so with that said, let's wrap things up. Now, starting off with the price, obviously this is expensive. I think we all expected it to be expensive, and then it got more expensive, but that's just Garmin's MO. At this point in time, I would not recommend the Garmin Varia Vault side of it. I just don't see any value in the way they've put that together at this point in time. Maybe they'll change how things work in the future, but right now that just seems like complete overkill and unnecessary and just not designed well for cyclists. But when it comes to the core features of this, number one, being the light, is the light good? Yeah, the light's good. I have no problems with that. And then number two, is the camera good for reading license plates? Yep, it's good for that. Is it good as an action camera? No, absolutely. It's horrific for an action camera, but it is good at picking out license plates. So for that piece, if you want that and you want the nice durable build quality this appears to be, it seems like it's super well built. Hopefully you found this video interesting or useful. If so, go ahead and give it a like at the bottom or hit subscribe for plenty more sports tech goodness. With that, have a good one.